In Brazil, former President Lula da Silva leads the first mass rally in Sao Paulo as part of the start of the campaign for the presidency of the nation. Russia's defense ministry denounced that the Ukrainian regime used banned chemical weapons against Russian troops. And in Somalia, the death toll in an attack by Al-Shabaab militants on a hotel in the country's capital rose to 14. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Brazil, former President Lula da Silva leads the first mass rally in Sao Paulo as part of the start of his campaign for the presidency. The event, named Ato pela Democracia, started at 11 a.m. local time. The meeting was organized for Act for Democracy campaign and is being held at Vale do Anhangabaú in Sao Paulo, the same place where in April 1984 took place a historical rally of the Direita Já campaign, which called for the end of military dictatorship. This is the second major demonstration of Brazil da Esperança coalition after the official launching of its campaign for the Palácio do Planalto. President Gustavo Petro has announced a profound transformation of the national police, parity between men and women, as well as hierarchy were some of the points advanced by the head of state. During a ceremony to transfer command held at the police headquarters in Bogota, the president announced that the proposed reform, based on the principle of human security, would also focus on its professionalization. His speech included a historical reference to what has been the relationship between the security forces of Colombia and the people.
The national police are not here to chase youngsters in the parks. The national police are not here to knock down a street vendor's food cart. That's what the national police have lived on. The national police are not here to go to a farmer's house and drag them into jail because they grow coca leaf. 25% of prisoners in jail are farmers in Colombia. This will only provoke secret underground wars in the neighborhoods, a permanent and growing confrontation between a young citizenry that is angry and young police force.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro's intense agenda also brought him to meet with his country's bankers in Cartagena, in the north of the country, where the 56th Banking Convention is held. The head of state called on them to finance production and think less about profitability. The first such meeting took place on the closing day of the convention. There he referred to the economic recession that the country has been experiencing since 2008 and which has been aggravated by the world crisis caused by the pandemic and armed conflicts. In the face of this panorama, he proposed 3 themes for analysis and joint work related to what the banks should finance, democratization of production, and the urgent actions posed by the climate change. He also reminded the Colombian managers that banking alone does not generate wealth. In Venezuela, the grassroots of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela held elections to update the leaders of the community management organizations. Militants will nominate the so-called straight leaders of the party, where they direct vote, universal and secret. The 4 most voted will be elected. Meanwhile, on August 27th, the election of the community leaders will take place, and on September 3rd, the election of the heads of Bolivar Chavez battle unions will be held, thus culminating the unprecedented process of renewal of government party from grassroots level. Perus President Pedro Castillo welcomed Friday the call made by the Peruvian Bishops' Conference to find a way out of the political and social crisis that the country is going through. Peruvian Archbishop and President of the Peruvian Archbishops' Conference, Miguel Cabrejo, called on the powers of the state and civil society to agree on a solution to the crisis. Cabrejo pointed out that it is urgent to seek channels of dialogue between the powers and civil society to guarantee governability and the common good of the country. The event took place while the judicial investigations for alleged corruption of the head of state are advancing and the confrontations between the Congress and the presidency are intensifying. The Attorney General's Office of the Republic requested the arrest warrant against Murillo Karam for his alleged responsibility in the crimes for forced disappearance, torture, and against the administration of justice, all related to the disappearance of the 34 normalists of Ayotzinapa. The arrest comes a day after the Truth Commission of the Ministry of Interior presented a preliminary report that assures the disappearance of the normalist students was a state crime. The Mexican government officially rejects the so-called historical truth presented by Murillo Karam on January 27, 2015, and which insists that the normalists were burned in the Cocula landfill by members of organized crime. We're going to take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Russia, the Ministry of Defense denounced that the Ukrainian regime used banned chemical weapons against Russian troops. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed that its specialists will submit a document to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons with evidence of the use of chemical weapons against soldiers by Ukrainian military. According to the statement on July 31st, Russian soldiers were performing tasks in Zaporizhia region and had to be transferred to a military hospital with signs of severe poisoning. The Russian military medical authorities determined through an examination the presence of botulinum toxin type B, a poison of artificial origin, in the blood of poisoned soldiers. This report is added to the documents presented by Moscow and chemical and biological laboratories financed from the United States in Ukraine. In Ukraine, Russian forces eliminated some 20 U.S. mercenaries in Andrevka village in Kharkov region. The Russian Defense Ministry reported on Saturday that its air force shot down around 80 members of Kraken extremist group. The report details that since the beginning of military operations in Ukraine on February 24th, Russian troops have disabled 267 aircraft, 148 helicopters, 1,776 drones, 367 anti-aircraft missile systems, and 4,354 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 809 multiple missile launcher systems, and over 3,000 pieces of field artillery. In Lugansk, Donbass, there is new evidence of Ukrainian terrorist attacks against civilians, from the destruction of residential buildings to attacks on their own population prior to the arrival of Russian troops, to the spraying of miniature mines in urban areas. Our special envoy Alejandro Kirk has more.
Pervomaisk, or May Day, is one of many mining towns in the Donbass.
On the evening of August 16th, this building on my back was shelled by Ukrainian forces using the new rockets provided by the United States.
Neighbors here demand more resolute action from Russia to end attacks.
Because I am Russian too, we're all Russians here. We're sick and tired of putting up with all this. We're fed up. Here we sit her down, kids die, and that's it. And that's settled with 4 rockets to the other side. This is the kind of moment in things, in time, when you have to hit Kiev, I think. In Kiev, you send just 4 rockets to hit the banks and the parliament, and this epic will stop.
A short trip through Lugansk takes us to the areas recently recaptured by Russian troops and people's militias. This point marked until recently the border between Lugansk and Ukraine. We soon reached the hotly contested twin cities of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, now under Russian control. This was the building of the Ukrainian border guard troops. As soon as we enter, a message reminds us of who they are. But the story of Zoya, a neighbor, is nevertheless astonishing.
Clearly, no one wanted war. We didn't expect this war, but when we saw that what was happening, what the Ukrainians were doing here, just went into shock. We all saw it. We were shocked because they were shooting all the time. The Ukrainians were constantly attacking our city from Severodonetsk, although there were no Russians around yet. One day, they were shelling a square here, then another one 3 days later, and on the 4th, another one. I think they were pretending that there was a military situation here, and they were shooting all the time, creating this atmosphere as if there was a war going on here.
Before fleeing, they promised to raze everything to the ground.
People say that the military was constantly on alert because they had installed booby traps. They blew up our water reservoir where the central pump was. They did it. They said they were going to do it, and they did it. I must clarify that not everyone saw it, but in the end, they did not even hide it. When they started to leave, they themselves advised everyone to leave. They had friends in various places at that time, and they told them to leave because we are going to wipe this place off the face of the earth. That's how they spoke, bluntly. They didn't hide it.
In Lysychansk, this ruined mansion hides dangerous secrets. Miniature anti-personnel mines, the kind Ukraine launches in missiles into the urban areas of the Donbass. Alejandro Kirk, teleSUR, Lugansk People's Republic.
Argentina's government is considering to initiate legal actions against those responsible for the forest fires in the islands along the delta of Paraná River. The Vice Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development, Sergio Federovsky, stated that once they have been able to find out who is working in the different places where the fires are taking place, they will take direct legal actions against those responsible for the attack on nature. This is after stating that almost all of the fires in the area are intentional and insisting on the responsibility of the judicial systems to investigate those cases. Regarding the work to control the fire, he affirmed that there is a record number of over 120 brigade members working, and added that the 10 aerial means that were present on Friday, another 3 were added in the last hours: a helicopter with a heliball, an hydroplane plane, and a helicopter for brigade transportation. The death toll of flooding caused by a landslide in western China has risen to 23 on Saturday, while 8 other people are still missing. A sudden rainstorm in western China's Qinghai province triggered a landslide that diverted a river and caused flash flooding that hit 6 villages in Datong County, forcing some 1,500 people out of their homes. More than 600 firefighters and 100 fire engines joined in the rescue work, and an investigation of the cause of the landslide is underway. China is facing both heavy rains and flooding in some parts of the country this summer, and extreme heat and drought in other regions. State media have described the prolonged heat and drought as the worst since record keeping started 60 years ago. In India, at least 15 people died as a result of floods and landslides caused by monsoon rains in recent days. 8 of the victims are related to a landslide in the northern state of Himachal Pradesh, where 2 houses were swept away by floodwaters. These deaths are added to the list of 48 deaths recorded in June 2022 due to flash floods that reached pilgrims camps, railway workers, and army reservists in the state of Manipur. Floods and landslides are more frequent in India during the monsoon season from June to September, and climate change has increased their frequency and intensity. In the United Kingdom, the railway strike continues in protest against the rise in inflation that affects British wages. This Saturday continues the nation's transport strike, which on Thursday, August 18th, brought transport in the United Kingdom almost to a standstill. Residents report areas without train service, as well as the operation of 1 out of 5 trains. Union representatives and leaders warned that protests in the country could intensify unless a compromise could be reached on pay rises and working conditions. According to the Bank of England, inflation in the country will exceed 13% in 2022, mainly affecting the food and energy sectors. More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Somalia, the death toll in an attack by Al-Shabaab militants on a hotel in the capital Mogadishu rose to 14. According to a security services official, in the last hours it was confirmed the discovery of another 5 dead victims. He also detailed that most of the civilians who were in the hotel at the moment of the attack have already been rescued. Of this group of people, at least 40 are being treated for injuries suffered in the assault on the hotel. The attack began on Friday night and lasted about 15 hours after members of the Somali criminal armed group forced their way into the Hayat Hotel building, which is frequented by politicians and government officials, and randomly shot at the civilians inside. The government of Angola announced that the mortal remains of former President José Eduardo dos Santos, who died in Spain, will arrive to the capital city Luanda on Saturday. Authorities informed in a statement that after the transfer approval by the Spanish government on Monday, the body of former president will be repatriated, although it is known that he wanted to be buried abroad to prevent the political use of his death. Angolan citizens who followed Dos Santos point out that the return of the former president's body could exacerbate tensions in the context of the elections to be held on August 24th. In Chad, this Saturday began a new round of inclusive national dialogue aimed at reaching an agreement to call elections and return to a civilian government. The opening of a national dialogue in N'Djamena City gathers 1,400 delegates from the military government, civil society, opposition parties, trade unions, and rebel groups. These talks were prompted by Board Chief General Mohamed Idris Deby, who took power last year replacing his father, who ruled for 30 years and was assassinated during military operations against rebels. This meeting takes place after an agreement earlier this month with more than 40 opposition groups to start peace talks. In Algeria, at least 40 dead and 1,000 families displaced by the numerous forest fires in the north of the country. According to local authorities, some 30 of the total deaths were recorded in the eastern part of the province of Tarf, close to the border with Tunisia. Meanwhile, over 200 people are reported to have been injured in the flames. The Algerian government indicated that the fire has been brought under control. However, over 1,700 firemen were called to remain deployed on alert. The authorities report that nearly 1,000 families have been evacuated in the area in order to protect their lives, while some of them have lost their belongings due to the fires.
The trees are all gone. The pomegranate trees burned along with the lemon trees and their fruits. Our furniture got destroyed, including the TV. Nothing was left on it. My daughter's clothes and all the belongings were gone, scattered everywhere. Everything we had was destroyed during this disaster. We only have God to rely on.
The United Nations World Food Programme is expanding assistance in the Horn of Africa as levels of hunger soar after back-to-back droughts and threat of famine looms. The number of people at risk of starvation in the drought-ravaged Horn of Africa has increased to 22 million, the UN's World Food Programme said Friday. According to aid groups, years of insufficient rainfall across Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia have caused the worst drought in 40 years, and conditions related to famine in the hardest hit areas. An unprecedented 4 failed rainy seasons has killed millions of livestock, destroyed crops, and forced 1.1 million people from their homes in search of food and water. WFP Executive Director David Beasley blames climate change for the driest season that we have seen in decades.
Climate change is impacting the entire world, and where I stand here in the Horn of Africa is absolutely no different. We're now looking at 20 million people marching to starvation here in the Horn of Africa. In fact, where I stand in Somalia, 7 million people, and that's twice as many as it was just 6 months ago. Why? Conflict, extremist groups, coupled with the driest season that we have seen in decades. 4 or 5 rainy seasons have just disappeared. And in the past 4 decades, the driest we've ever seen it in a long, long time.
teleSUR English continues to grow its signal on Reaches Europe. You can order from your cable leader or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us, and our stories are heard in other faraway nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. And now you can also follow us on TikTok account at telesur English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. For telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.